There was a active shooter at the Dallas location about 7:40 East Coast time.
This is the third shooting in Texas directed at ICE or CBP. This must stop.
This is Today as It Happened. Good Wednesday evening to you. I'm Holly Furfer here with your chronological look at the biggest events and stories of the day. From the deadly shooting at an ICE facility in Dallas to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's address to the United Nations. So let's jump right in.
Dear leaders, dear friends, and all those who can become our friends, because you want safety and peace just as much as we do. Today, no one but ourselves can guarantee security. Only strong alliances, only strong partners, and only our own weapons.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy told world leaders that we are in the most destructive arms race in history. Speaking at the UN General Assembly earlier today, Zelenskyy warned that Vladimir Putin wants to expand his war beyond Ukraine into Europe. Scripps News International correspondent Jason Bellini is live in New York with details. And Jason, President Zelenskyy made his case for why the war in Ukraine matters to the entire world. So tell us more about the warning that he's trying to send.
Hi, Holly. What Zelensky's used this opportunity to speak to the world to say is that, one, drones are going to change the world in terms of warfare. And we've certainly seen that ourselves on the front line, how that's happening. And now he says you add in artificial intelligence and also other capabilities and how cheap they are, so that non-state actors outside of Ukraine who aren't necessarily working with governments, terrorists, could be using these same technologies birthed in the war in Ukraine. He says that's a grave threat to the planet and that this war must stop. Here's what he said earlier today.
Stopping Putin now is cheaper than trying to protect every port and every ship from terrorists with sea drones. Stopping Russia now is cheaper than wondering who will be the first to create a simple drone carrying a nuclear warhead. So we must use everything we have together to force the aggressor to stop. And only then do we have a real chance that this arms race will not end in catastrophe for all of us.
The arms race will not end in catastrophe for all of us. That's the warning from President Zelenskyy. And he made an interesting ask today of NATO, suggesting that NATO and Ukraine integrate their air defense systems, that NATO could provide coverage along its eastern border if they were to integrate. And he also emphasized the growing threat from Russia, hybrid war, meaning attacks, cyber attacks, and other attacks that are testing the abilities and capabilities of European countries and NATO to respond, referencing those incursions into NATO airspace that have happened in the last few weeks, saying that right now Putin is testing the West. Holly?
And Jason, President Trump, his tone towards Ukraine took a major shift yesterday. What was the significance of what he had to say in his new thoughts?
His new thoughts, well, those are shocking indeed, really. I don't think that's too strong a word. First, he called Zelenskyy a brave man, a major change in tone from his first meeting. This was yesterday, his fourth meeting with Zelenskyy, and what a shift. And he was saying yesterday, President Trump was saying that Ukraine, he believes now, could win the war. And by winning the war, he means that they could take all of the territory that Russia currently occupies back. How that would happen and what influenced his impression on this, that Ukraine now apparently does hold the cards in his view, we don't know. The Russians today, for their part, are saying, we need to have a talk with Trump ourselves to make sure he understands our side of the situation, Holly.
Yeah, and interesting, yesterday President Trump also called out some of the countries, the European Union countries that are still buying gas, oil from Russia, keeping them basically afloat and wanting to put stronger tariffs and sanctions on Russia, so we'll see how that plays out. Scripps News international correspondent Jason Bellini live outside the United Nations. Thank you for that update. Camp Mystic, the Texas girls' summer camp where 27 campers and counselors died in flooding in July. They plan to reopen next summer. That decision has shocked and divided the once tight-knit community of camp alumni and parents. Camp owners announced their intentions in 2 emails sent Monday to different groups. One email went to the families of the girls who died, another to past campers who remain loyal to camp leadership. The camp will reopen at a second site near the original location along the Guadalupe River. Hundreds of federal employees who lost their jobs in Elon Musk's cost-cutting blitz are being asked to return to work. The General Services Administration has given employees until the end of the week to accept reinstatement. Those who accept must report for duty October 6th after what amounts to a 7-month paid vacation. The agency was left broken and understaffed without people to carry out basic functions. A former GSA official says the sudden reversal shows Musk's Department of Government Efficiency went too far, too fast. Ryan Ruth has been convicted of trying to assassinate President Trump at a Florida golf course last year. The jury found Ruth guilty on all 5 federal charges Tuesday. During that verdict reading, Ruth tried to stab himself in the neck with a pen, but authorities stopped him. The 59-year-old represented himself during the trial. Prosecutors said Ruth was stalking President Trump at his golf club, and Ruth claimed an assassination was never going to happen. He faces life in prison and will be sentenced December 18th. Coming up on Today as It Happened.
It was never my intention to make light of the murder of a young man.
Welcome back to Today as It Happened. Let's check back in on our daily briefing of today's top stories. A new study finds eating certain fruits and vegetables can increase harmful pesticide levels in your body. Researchers say people who ate more strawberries, spinach, and bell peppers had significantly higher pesticide levels in their urine. The Environmental Working Group study linked diet directly to pesticide exposure. Pesticides have been connected to cancer, hormone disruption, and harm to children. Experts still recommend eating plenty of fruits and vegetables, but suggest choosing organic when possible for the least contaminated produce. And Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell is taking a cautious approach to future interest rate cuts. Speaking in Rhode Island Tuesday, Powell warned against cutting rates too aggressively, saying it could leave inflation unfinished. His careful stance contrasts with other Fed officials who want faster cuts. Trump-appointed Fed member Stephen Miran wants rates cut as low as 2%. Fed Governor Michelle Bowman also calling for quicker action to address labor market concerns. The Fed cut rates for the first time this year last week. After nearly a week off the air, late-night talk show host Jimmy Kimmel returned to television last night. The show was suspended after Kimmel's comments regarding the shooting death of political activist Charlie Kirk caused controversy and was pulled by ABC's owner Disney. Scripps News Washington correspondent Stephanie Liebergen joins us now live from our D.C. studio with reaction to last night's show. And Steph, what have people been saying today after Kimmel's return last night?
Hey, Holly, good afternoon. I should say now, almost said good morning. There were certainly a lot of people waiting to see how exactly Jimmy Kimmel was going to address this, address the controversy that really embroiled his show for the last few weeks. And he did what I would describe as an extended monologue, taking up almost 30 minutes of the show, addressing almost entirely the controversy and the Trump administration, and a lot of emphasis on free speech. He, of course, thanks the outpouring of support that he has received, even some support from unlikely sources, naming some Republicans who came out in support of the free speech argument as to why the government should not play a role in what comedians or the news says on television. And he didn't directly say the words, "I'm sorry" or "I apologize," when addressing the controversial statements from his Monday night monologue last week, but he did certainly get emotional the couple times that he addressed the death of Charlie Kirk and how his joke was interpreted.
But I do want to make something clear because it's important to me as a human, and that is, you understand that it was never my intention to make light of the murder of a young man.
I don't think there's anything funny about it.
I posted a message on Instagram on the day he was killed, sending love to his family and asking for compassion, and I meant it. On Sunday, Erica Kirk forgave the man who shot her husband. She forgave him. That is an example we should follow.
Another theme throughout his monologue was the importance of the First Amendment and of free speech. Kimmel criticized the FCC chair, Brendan Carr, for his remarks that ultimately kind of led to his show getting pulled off the air for 4 nights. And he also criticized President Trump and the president weighing in and trying to get him and other late-night comics pulled off the air.
The government threat to silence a comedian the president doesn't like is anti-American. That's anti-American. The president of the United States made it very clear he wants to see me and the hundreds of people who work here fired from our jobs. Our leader celebrates Americans losing their livelihoods because he can't take a joke.
Kimmel said it's not about him as an individual, but about the importance of making sure that shows like his and the other late-night comics, that those are allowed to exist. Of course, even though he returned to the airwaves last night, millions of Americans could not watch him on their local ABC station because of the continued blackout by Netflix and Sinclair stations. But it seems that many of those viewers, millions of those viewers, went to the internet to see what Kimmel had to say. The YouTube video that posted his nearly 30-minute monologue at last check had over 10.5, over 11.2 million views now this morning. So for folks, certainly seems people who couldn't watch him on air live last night have gone to the internet, they've gone to streaming options to try to catch up, Holly.
A lot of people interested. And I understand, Steph, that Charlie Kirk's organization, Turning Point USA, has weighed in on the controversy. What are they saying?
So one of the spokesmen for Turning Point was on Fox News earlier today and was asked directly about Kimmel's response and Kimmel's reaction to the controversy. And the spokesman was not pleased, wasn't happy with what Kimmel had to say. And it seems to stem directly from the fact that Kimmel didn't say directly the words, "I'm sorry," or "I apologize," or "I ask for your forgiveness." Those seem to be the key words that spokesman feels were lacking from Kimmel's response last night. He argues that Kimmel didn't take responsibility for his comment, for his joke from last week, saying that he didn't own up to his mistake. But that is, the Turning Point organization, of course, the one that, as Charlie Kirk is known for creating, very powerful, and the young conservative movement, an organization that his wife now, Erica Kirk, will be taking over and leading in her husband's absence. But Turning Point USA not happy with what Kimmel had to say in response and in reaction as he returned for the first night last night, Holly.
All right, Scripps News Washington correspondent Stephanie Lieber again live for us. Thank you, Steph. Up next on Today As It Happened.
What we do know is there's been a massive uptick in threats across the board to ICE agents. And traditionally and historically, when these facilities were designed, they were not looking for these kind of layered or deep outside the perimeter threats that I think we're starting to see today.
You're watching Today As It Happened, Scripps News rundown of the biggest events and stories of the day. So let's get to it.
More headaches for travelers across the pond. British police arrested a man in his 40s over a cyber attack that disrupted business as usual, I should say, at several European airports. The attack started Friday, lasted through the weekend. Officials say the hack affected check-in systems, forcing employees to have to handwrite boarding passes. Now, the suspect was released on bail. This investigation continues. FBI agents say they found classified documents while searching former National Security Advisor John Bolton's Washington office last month. They say the documents included materials marked secret and confidential. related to weapons of mass destruction and UN missions. Investigators are looking into potential violations of the Espionage Act. Bolton's lawyer says the documents were previously approved and many are more than 20 years old. The search came after investigators determined Bolton's email account was hacked by a foreign entity. We have some breaking news to update you on. A gunman opened fire on a U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement facility in Dallas early this morning, killing 2 people and wounding at least 1 other. Authorities say the shooter fired from a nearby rooftop before taking his own life. Now, the FBI says ammunition found at the scene contained anti-ICE messaging. Investigators are calling this an act of targeted violence, and detainees were the victims that we know of the shooting. No ICE agents were injured in this attack, and it comes amid what Homeland Security officials call an uptick in targeting ICE agents. So for more details on this and kind of unpack this more, we want to bring in former acting ICE Director John Sandwig. John, thank you for being with us. There's certainly a lot we don't know right now. Something we all need to be better at is waiting for actual concrete information before any speculation. But here's what we do know, right? 3 detainees were shot, 2 of them died, 1 is in critical condition. And the FBI special agent, like I said, in charge said that this was targeted violence. So talk to us about what kind of security is there at an ICE office like this.
Yeah, Marie, so these are difficult to secure against these kind of threats. These are hybrid facilities. So they're facilities that are in part an office space for the localized leadership to work out of and the agents to work out of, in part holding cells for detainees, where detainees after they're arrested are brought into this facility, processed, and then transported out to long-term detention facilities. But they're also open to the public. This is where migrants who might be going through immigration, deportation proceedings, who are not being detained, have to come in and check in. So given all of the requirements of this facility, it is a difficult one to protect. And a lot of the security features were designed thinking more from the inside out, right? Trying to make sure that those detainees aren't able to escape, who've been booked into custody. But unfortunately, ICE has never faced threats like this. And while we don't know what the circumstances of this attack was or what motivated it, what we do know is there's been a massive uptick in threats across the board to ICE agents. And traditionally and historically, when these facilities were designed, they were not looking for these kind of layered or deep outside the perimeter threats that I think we're starting to see today.
So do you think that we're going to see updates on some of these facilities now in light of what happened this morning to better protect them?
Yeah, Marisa, you have to. And it's not just these facilities, it's going to be all ICE operations. ICE, the way in which ICE operations typically work, and especially, some of the tactics that this administration has been using, it renders the agents very vulnerable. So when we see these large worksite operations where you have a large number of agents who are in a fixed location for a long period of time, unfortunately, we've seen that's drawing protesters, that's drawing people who have taken it a step too far and start throwing rocks at agents, but it leaves the agents vulnerable. So absolutely, ICE has to work through their entire security plans here and update what the operational tactics are going to be to ensure that we have that baseline level of security for the officers and agents who are doing the work. Marisa, look, the number one rule when you're at the department, when you're at ICE, is, of course, officer safety. You have to make sure you protect your workforce above everything else. And so I guarantee you that ICE is starting to take a deep look at not just these types of facilities, but long-term detention facilities, but also how officers are being protected when they're out in the field.
So, John, I mentioned the FBI director, and he put out a post on X, and he said that he posted a picture of unspent shell casings, and one of them had anti-ICE on it, and he's calling this despicable, politically motivated attacks. You yourself said, we don't know. We don't know yet what motivated this. But we do know that the 3 people who were shot, 2 of them killed, were detainees. So what do you make of that? If the FBI director is saying this is anti-ICE sentiment, why would the person shoot and kill detainees?
Well, so first of all, I'll tell you, just from working through a large number of crises during my time at DHS, the initial reporting is always inaccurate. So I think, I really am hesitant to speculate about what the motivations were. Obviously, I saw the shell casing. But, the problem with this is when you're sitting there in Washington and you're getting lots of people in the field are eager to get you updates. Historically, those initial updates can be inaccurate. It's not until things settle down that you start getting more accurate information in. Secondly, though, in terms of the motives of this individual, obviously you seem to have these contradictory kind of points. You have 8, detainees who are the victims here, and these anti-ICE messages written on the shell casings. Right now, the FBI Homeland Security investigations, ICE criminal investigative arm, and other agencies, I promise you, are combing deeply through this person's history, interviewing his friends, his family, looking at his social media activity, looking for any intelligence or any holdings that the U.S. might have on him. We're going to learn a lot more about his true motives in the coming days. This very well could have been an attack on ICE officers. That said, if you're doing that, he picked an unusual time to do it, because typically what's happening here is they brought inside the perimeter a load of detainees that they were then going to put in the holding facilities inside the office. More often than not, you typically have more detainees in that circumstance than you are going to have ICE officers. Now, that said, these detainees would not necessarily be wearing prisoner uniforms at this time. They'd be wearing street clothes. I just, there's so much we just don't know. It's really hard to speculate as to whether he was targeting the detainees or whether he was targeting the agents, or maybe he was even just confused. I think we just need to wait and see what happens, what the investigators find, and what information is released in the coming hours and days.
I think that's sage advice. We've seen so much confusion about so many investigations because, like you said, initial reporting can be and has been inaccurate in many instances. So I'm wondering, if you were leading ICE right now, what would you be telling not only officers, but the public?
Well, I think the first thing and the most important thing is talking to your officers and make sure that they know that you have their back. And that is that we are going to do everything we can to make sure that they're protected.
Okay, former acting ICE director and partner at Nixon Peabody, John Sandwig, thank you so much for joining us, for your time and your insight.
Coming up on Today As It Happened.
I'm Joe St. George in Washington. We're getting closer to the first possible government shutdown in nearly 7 years. So what happens if the federal government shuts down next week? We explain next.
Welcome back to Today As It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. Let's get back to our rundown of the day's top stories.
3, 2, 1. Engines full power. And liftoff. Go Falcon, go high now.
And NASA and NOAA successfully launching 3 spacecraft today. The goal here is to investigate the sun's influence across the solar system. NASA explains that this mission advances space weather readiness, protects our satellites, and to give NASA critical insight to future missions to the moon and Mars. YouTube is creating a reinstatement process for creators whose accounts it had suspended for spreading misinformation during the COVID-19 pandemic. The announcement comes in response to pressure from House Republicans. Now, Alphabet, YouTube's parent company, said it's cooperating with lawmakers, providing documents and testimony to support an investigation into whether big tech companies were pressured to remove certain types of content. The reinstatement of accounts is the latest example of tech platforms relaxing content moderation in recent years. And new home sales surged in August, with new single-family homes up by more than 20%. That's according to newly released government reporting. This is the fastest pace since early 2022. Experts say the increase is due to builders cutting home prices and adding sales incentives. Now, the median sale price for a new home sold in August was $413,500. There we go, about $8,000 more year to date. Now, for the average price for a new home sold last month, it was roughly $540,000. Let's make a deal. That's what lawmakers on Capitol Hill need to do by next Wednesday, October 1st, to avoid another government shutdown. And right now, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries is gaggling with reporters on the Hill. We want to listen in.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let me begin by expressing our heartfelt condolences, prayers, and sympathies to the families of the victims of the shooting that occurred earlier today at the ICE facility in Dallas. We're also very thankful and appreciative of the first responders who showed up on the scene, raced toward danger, and secured the situation to prevent any further carnage. The level of political violence and ideologically motivated violence across the spectrum is far too high in the United States of America right now. We need leadership that brings people together, not national leadership that tears people apart. We are here today in the Capitol, ready to get to work, ready to meet with anyone, anytime, any place, in order to avoid a painful Republican-caused government shutdown. We will partner in a bipartisan way to try to find common ground in order to enact a spending bill that actually meets the needs of the American people. Democrats do not support the partisan Republican spending bill because it continues to gut the health care of the American people. Republicans have launched an all-out assault on the health care of everyday Americans, the largest cut to Medicaid in American history. Millions of people throughout urban America, rural America, small-town America, and the heartland of America, along with Black and brown America, losing coverage. The Affordable Care Act is under assault by Republicans who refuse to extend the tax credits, and as a result, at least 20 million Americans are going to experience dramatically increased health care premiums, copays, and deductibles. Medicare will face a $536 billion cut at the end of this year if Congress doesn't act because of the Republican one big ugly bill. All across the country, hospitals, nursing homes, and community-based health clinics are closing, including in rural America, because of the Republican health care crisis. And Republicans have effectively ended medical research in the United States of America, including terminating research for children with cancer. This is an immoral assault on the health care of the American people. And that's why Democrats have drawn a line in the sand. We will work together, sit down, meet anytime, any place, with anyone in order to avoid a Republican-caused government shutdown and in order to decisively address the Republican health care crisis that is devastating the people of the United States of America. Questions?
Mr. Leader, at this point, with no talk scheduled, do you just anticipate this to be on a cruise control toward a government shutdown?
Republicans have clearly demonstrated they want to shut the government down. Throughout this process, an intentional decision was made by Republican leadership in the House and the Senate not to have a single conversation with Democrats. They're not even pretending as if they want to find common ground. Donald Trump agrees to our demand on Saturday to hold a meeting in the Oval Office to try to avert a government shutdown. The meeting is set on Monday for later on in the week, and then Donald Trump wakes up Tuesday morning and goes on an unhinged rant and cancels the meeting. Why? Because he doesn't want to discuss the Republican health care crisis, and they've decided to shut the government down. And on top of all of that, Mike Johnson cancels votes that we were scheduled to have next Tuesday and next Monday in immediate advancement of a possible government shutdown, decides that there's no need for us to be in town. I mean, that's all outrageous, and it points to one thing. Republicans have decided to shut the government down.
What do you think got to the president?
When was the last time that you spoke to Speaker Johnson about the shutdown, Commissioner?
We spoke briefly last week about the logistics around the government funding vote, but had no discussion about substance.
If Republicans were to include an ACA funding extension in the CR, would that be sufficient to win your support?
We have to have a conversation with Republicans in order to work toward decisively resolving the healthcare crisis that they've created. And part of that healthcare crisis relates to the Republican refusal to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. America is already too expensive. Electricity bills are skyrocketing, housing costs are skyrocketing, grocery prices are skyrocketing. The Trump tariffs are causing increased expenses to the tune of thousands of dollars per year.
Okay, we've been listening to House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries talking to reporters on Capitol Hill about ongoing budget negotiations to avoid a government shutdown that could happen by next week if they don't reach a deal. Scripps News Deputy Political Director Joe St. George explains the impacts of a government shutdown, which could happen on October 1st.
The odds of the first government shutdown in nearly 7 years are increasing by the day. Government funding runs out in less than a week, and the House and the Senate aren't even meeting this week. So, because it's been a while, what happens if, in fact, the government does shut down? Let's start with Social Security checks. Medicare and Medicaid, all three continue uninterrupted during a shutdown. But other government services may be suspended, with some offices shutting down. With prime autumn leaf viewing on the horizon in many parts of the country, you may be wondering about national parks. Traditionally, they have been impacted during a shutdown. Roads could close and services may be reduced. A big impact, though, when shutdowns happen are paychecks for those who work for the federal government. Federal contractors, federal employees, and military service members are three groups to watch. Contractors can lose out on pay altogether. Full and part-time federal employees and military service members could face a delay in their paychecks. A 2019 law does require back pay when the government reopens, but that does not apply to contractors. The first shutdown impacted paycheck wouldn't occur until October 10th. That's according to the pay schedule for federal employees. The Trump administration would determine who is an essential worker and who is not. Essential workers would be expected to report to work. In 2018, during the last shutdown, TSA workers were deemed essential, but as Scripps News Group stations across the country reported at the time, there was an uptick in some employees calling in sick. And if you're wondering, what is the political divide right now? Republicans essentially want the government to be funded the same until late November, with no policy changes to health care. Democrats disagree and are concerned premiums will rise for many Americans in the months ahead as Affordable Care Act subsidies expire.
If Chuck Schumer intends to shut the government down, I don't see an easy route out of that, and there's going to be a lot of pain.
Our position has never changed. We need bipartisan legislation to keep the government open and meet the needs of the American people, especially on costs, specifically health care costs.
Joe St. George, Scripps News Group, Washington.
Up next on Today As It Happened.
Fired, then rehired. That could be the case for hundreds of federal workers. I'm Alex Miller in New York. Coming up, which agencies might be taking their employees back after those DOGE cuts?
Welcome back to Today As It Happened. Let's jump back into the rundown of our top stories of the day.
Well, remember when Doge, led by Elon Musk, that team was on a tear cutting jobs and budgets left and right? Well, they say it was to shrink the federal government, but those cuts might be getting partially reversed. National political correspondent Alex Miller joins us now live. Alex, one agency is reportedly set to rehire federal workers who were fired or actually even resigned. So what's going on here?
Well, Maritza, if you remember, the Department of Government Efficiency was aimed to be efficient. They were aiming to cut costs across the federal government. Now we are seeing at least one of these agencies reversing course and trying to get back some of those workers who had to leave.
Fired and then rehired. That could be the case for hundreds of federal workers who lost their jobs as part of Elon Musk's DOGE cuts earlier this year. According to reporting from the Associated Press, the General Services Administration is giving hundreds of workers until the end of this week to either accept or decline taking their jobs back.
You should think of GSA as like the janitor at the building where you work. Unshowy, but if they stop working, things start to break down really quickly, and you need them to fix it.
The GSA oversees thousands of government workspaces. Earlier this year, DOGE cut its headquarters staff by nearly 80%.
DOGE operated on a fire rather than a ready, aim, fire strategy. And the consequences are that most of what it did actually created more waste than it solved for.
In a statement to Scripps News, a GSA spokesperson said its leadership team has comprehensively considered workforce actions and is making adjustments in the best interests of the customer agencies we serve and the American taxpayers. They also said it's important to note that the majority of separations have been voluntary.
Public policy professor Donald Moynihan says that's up to interpretation.
The majority of resignations were technically voluntary, but also heavily coerced.
The IRS says it will allow some employees who resigned under DOJ pressure to come back, and the Labor Department has done the same. The move could be part of a wider DOJ reversal, according to public affairs and administration expert Mark Holzer.
It's not going to be just GSA. It's going to be, agency by agency by agency.
And Maritza, those GSA workers who choose to accept their position back will have to be in the office on October 6th. Now, what GSA did not tell us is how many people are coming back to work, what their job functions will look like, or whether they were paid some sort of leave while they were gone, whether they'll be paid for their time away.
Alex, this is fascinating to me because I remember when we were covering all of these cuts and talking about all of these cuts, and so many federal workers talked about feeling really insecure at the end of each week. They didn't know if they were going to be part of the next round. So what sort of long-term impact could this have, not only for the rehiring, but government hiring as a whole?
Well, experts tell us that it could have an impact on hiring in terms of being a deterrent. You think about it, the government has always been a really stable job, a place where you know that you can grow and stay in your career for the most part. If anything, it's really difficult to fire people typically in the federal government. But now, because of all that we have seen transpire, experts say that this might say to the next potential employee that they lack stability in the federal government when it comes to work, and people might start looking elsewhere to try to get that stability, though, of course, the job market is difficult everywhere.
That's for sure. All right, Alex Miller, live for us from New York. Thank you so much, my friend. Good to see you. Coming up on Today As It Happened.
They were politically motivated to go after law enforcement. They were politically motivated to go after people who are enforcing our border.
Welcome back to Today As It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. All right, let's take a look back at today's events, the shooting at the Dallas ICE facility. We're going to take a look at how everything unfolded in our Today As It Happened timeline. Some breaking news to bring you. 3 people have been shot at an ICE detention facility in Dallas. The shooter is dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. We know this. ICE's acting director says the victims, though, could be employees, visitors, or detainees. It's unclear at this moment. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem confirms multiple injuries and fatalities, but the motive also remains unclear as this investigation continues.
We know that there were 3 fatalities, potentially detainees, not ICE law enforcement at this time, that there have been other injuries, and some individuals are in critical condition.
So what we know so far definitely is that there was a active shooter at the Dallas location about 7:40 East Coast time. It appears to be a sniper from an elevated position. Initially 3 individuals were shot. We do have multiple fatalities. All ICE agents and officers at the location are accounted for right now. It's still an active scene.
This comes at a very heightened time for ICE. Obviously, an uptick in the number of ICE operations all over the country. Many more immigrants being arrested as part of President Trump's deportation push, and along with that, more reports of assaults being reported against ICE officers.
Please join me in praying for the families of folks who lost their lives today.
This is the 3rd shooting in Texas directed at ICE or CBP. This must stop. To every politician who is using rhetoric demonizing ICE and demonizing CBP, stop. To every politician demanding that ICE agents be doxxed and calling for people to go after their families, stop. This has very real consequences.
We did just get a posting on social media on the website X from the FBI director posting a picture of unspent shell casings found at the scene near the shooters. There you see them with the words anti-ICE written on them. Kash Patel, the FBI director, saying that more updates will be forthcoming, but he also says these despicable, politically motivated attacks against law enforcement are not a one-off.
So first of all, I'll tell you, just from working through a large number of crises during my time at DHS, the initial reporting is always inaccurate. So I think, I really am hesitant to speculate about what the motivations were. Obviously, I saw the shell casing. But, the problem with this is when you're sitting there in Washington and you're getting lots of people in the field are eager to get you updates. Historically, those initial updates can be inaccurate. It's not until things settle down that you start getting more accurate information in.
We're still learning a little bit about it, but what we know is that in Dallas, Texas, an ICE facility, an Immigrations and Customs Enforcement facility, was opened fire upon by a violent left-wing extremist, a person who wrote anti-ICE messaging on their bullets, and there's some evidence that we have that's not yet public, but we know this person was politically motivated. They were politically motivated to go after law enforcement. They were politically motivated to go after people who are enforcing our border.
We just got some new images from the Department of Homeland Security that show some of the damage that was done during this attack, including 2 bullet holes in a enclosure there, that glass enclosure. It's sort of hard to see, but there are two bullet holes against the glass there where that flag is, but also a bullet hole in a window of this building. Department of Homeland Security saying that this gunman was firing indiscriminately at this field office in Dallas and also struck a van that was carrying detainees that was driving into the facility.
The level of political violence and ideologically motivated violence across the spectrum is far too high in the United States of America right now. We need leadership that brings people together, not national leadership that tears people apart.
Law enforcement officials say they have now identified the suspect in this morning's fatal shooting at an immigration facility in Dallas. They say the suspect is 29-year-old Joshua Jean. They have not provided more details on who he was or what his motive was.
Joshua Johns, he's 29 years old. Law enforcement has said that he has ties to Texas and Oklahoma, but he did take his own life on the rooftop there. Law enforcement officials found him deceased. And then, as you also heard, there were bullet casings with anti-ICE messages written on them.
The Department of Homeland Security is now correcting information they released on the shooting at an immigration center in Dallas this morning. There is 1 detainee who was killed, not 2 as reported, but 2 are critically injured. No ICE agents were hurt. Authorities say the gunman took his own life.
Thank you for joining us this evening for Today As It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. We hope you have a great Wednesday evening.